U.S. President Donald Trump has set a Thursday deadline for Ukraine to accept a 28-point peace proposal, negotiated directly between Washington and Moscow, according to Western officials and sources close to the talks. The plan, details of which have not been publicly released, is described as largely reflecting Russia's long-standing demands, including recognition of annexed territories and severe restrictions on Ukraine's military and future NATO membership. The White House has warned that failure to accept the proposal by the deadline will lead to a full withdrawal of American support for Kyiv, a threat that has sent shockwaves through European capitals. The surprise initiative has completely overshadowed the G20 summit in Johannesburg, the first ever held in Africa. European leaders who learned of the plan only after it was presented to Ukraine spent much of Sunday in emergency meetings on the sidelines of the gathering, which was meant to focus on debt relief and development in the global south. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, emerging as Europe's point person in the crisis, sharply criticized the process. "This war can only end with the unqualified agreement of Ukraine," Merz said. "Peace cannot be dictated by great powers over the heads of the countries fighting for their survival. Any durable agreement requires the consent of Ukraine and of Europe. This is a European war being fought on European soil." Late Friday, Merz secured a phone call with President Trump, the only European leader to do so before the U.S. president left for the G20. The conversation appears to have produced limited but critical concessions. Trump has agreed to send U.S. advisors to urgent talks in Geneva beginning Monday. Germany, France, Britain, the EU, and Ukraine will all be represented. President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to participate directly. European officials say several elements of the current draft are unacceptable. Formal cession of occupied Ukrainian territory, permanent limits on the size and capabilities of Ukraine's armed forces, a provision that would position the United States as the sole intermediary between NATO and Russia, a move Europeans interpret as a further American retreat from the continent's security, absence of enforceable Western security guarantees to replace those Russia violated when it seized Crimea and invaded in 2022. While some Europeans indicate willingness to discuss delayed or conditional NATO membership for Ukraine, they insist any deal must include Kastian commitments from the entire transatlantic community, not bilateral U.S.-Russian arrangements. The document itself has been deliberately kept under wraps to preserve room for maneuver in the coming days. Analysts note that even the Kremlin appeared cautious on Sunday. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the talks as contacts rather than consultations, suggesting Moscow views the current text as too favorable to be realistic and is already preparing fallback positions. Former U.S. Ambassador William Courtney of the RAND Corporation told DW that the plan bears the marks of having been drafted hastily by negotiators, real estate envoy Steve Witkoff for the U.S. and a low-profile Russian presidential aide with limited Ukraine expertise. President Trump wants a rapid end to the war, Courtney said, but the practical U.S. leverage is now much smaller than the rhetoric implies. Europe is carrying almost the entire financial and military burden, with the Geneva talks set to begin in less than 24 hours and the Thursday deadline looming. European leaders are racing to rewrite significant portions of the proposal before it is presented to Kyiv as a fait accompli. Failure to reach a common Western position risks not only the collapse of the initiative but a public fracture in transatlantic unity at a moment when Russia continues slow but steady advances on the battlefield.